that seals fate, the end of every heart. I'm no villain nor hero, I'm the peace amidst the pain, the angel who comes, who takes, yet offers love again.
April 1945. Berlin lies in ruins. The sound of bombs shakes the city as Adolf hides in a bunker underground, cut off from everything he once built. He's there, surrounded by a small group of allies and his wife, Eva, watching the inevitable end unfold. Inside that cramped bunker, the air is heavy, suffocating. Outside, the war rages on, but in here, everything feels frozen. He feels the weight of his choices. The future he once imagined, filled with glory and control, is crumbling before his eyes. What once seemed like certainty is now only silence and doubt. Each passing second brings the end closer. Questions he never wanted to face start to creep in. How did I get here? What went wrong? The sound of explosions blends with his thoughts. This is the story of Adolf's final hours. It's not just the end of a leader, but the collapse of a lifetime of decisions. April 30th, 1945, Berlin, Führerbunker, 6:43 a.m., 8 hours and 47 minutes until Adolf's death. What if one of the most terrible figures in history wasn't born to be that way? What if Adolf had, deep down, a positive mission, something to transform and build, but was led astray by forces that distorted the truth? I'm not here to judge anyone. I simply fulfill my duty, whether that's bringing a blessing or the weight of death. Here, I won't take sides on what's right or wrong, if such things even exist. Adolf wakes up abruptly, as if something is choking him. The air in the bunker is heavy, dense, almost unbearable. The silence inside is complete, except for the muffled sound of distant explosions. The space feels claustrophobic, a prison both physical and mental. The furniture is minimal, a metal bed, a desk scattered with papers and maps that no longer matter. Everything is cold and lifeless, just like him. Amid the oppressive silence, a strange sound echoes, footsteps, maybe? Something distant but enough to quicken his heartbeat. He shuts his eyes, searching for some logical explanation, but the feeling of unease only grows. Something is wrong, even here, in the stillness. The dream still lingers in his mind. In it, he was running, but not fast enough. Behind him, a crowd, men, women, children, all those who suffered under his regime. They came with faces marked by pain, a human wave that pressed forward relentlessly. But that wasn't the worst part. In the end, he saw himself young again, at the exact moment his life took the wrong turn. The figure that led him there was back, that shadow that once promised greatness. Now, awake, he realizes just how deceived he had been. The image of that dream still haunts him. He ran, tried to escape, but the ghosts of his actions followed. In the end, he saw himself as he once was, young and confused, face to face with the figure that would change his life forever. Adolf, who once sought greatness, now saw the fatal error in trusting the promises of that shadow with red hat. Panting, he rises from the bed, legs trembling, chest tight. He walks over to the mirror hanging on the wall. A simple object, framed in worn wood. When he looks, he sees the reflection of an old man, consumed by war and the choices that destroyed him. His skin is pale, almost transparent, and his eyes, once filled with fury, now show nothing but exhaustion and emptiness. And then, he sees it. Behind him, that same figure from his youth. The dark, mysterious presence that seduced him with promises of power and led him away from his true path. It stands there, in the reflection, lurking just over his shoulder, as if waiting for the right moment to claim what was promised. For a brief moment, he locks eyes with the shadow, and his entire body freezes. The footsteps return, closer now, more insistent, but he can't move. His heart races, cold sweat runs down his face. In that instant, Adolf realizes the shadow never left him. It was with him every step of the way. Now, face to face with what had guided him all his life, something new stirs. Regret, a bitter and unfamiliar feeling, begins to grow within him. Suddenly, a wave of panic crashes over him. He pulls away from the mirror, his heart pounding so hard it echoes in his ears. His breathing spirals out of control, as if the air itself refuses to enter his lungs. His hands tremble uncontrollably, cold sweat drenching his face, as his legs start to buckle under the weight of anxiety. The room spins around him, the walls closing in, leaving him no way out. He tries to fight off the overwhelming panic, but it's like trying to hold water in his hands. His mind, once cold and calculating, is now trapped in a whirlpool of fear. He feels the air leave his lungs, as if he's being suffocated by his own choices. The panic is not just about the approaching death, but the stark realization that everything he did was a mistake. With trembling hands, he clutches the edge of the table, struggling to stay on his feet. His thoughts are jumbled, but the physical pain of the panic attack grounds him in reality. His chest burns, each heartbeat reminding him that he is still alive. He fights for breath, but the air seems absent, as if an invisible cord tightens around his neck. For a moment, he wonders if his end will come sooner than expected, if his own body will betray him. The attack feels endless, but eventually, his body begins to give in to exhaustion. Slowly, air returns to his lungs, and his vision, once blurred, gradually clears. But the episode has left deep scars. He knows now that control is gone. Fear, regret, and that shadow that has always followed him have taken over. The clock keeps ticking. Each minute inevitably brings him closer to the end. He collapses into the chair, his body weak, drained. Cold sweat still trickles down his face, but the worst of the attack is over. What remains is the cruel pain of the truth he can no longer avoid. At 6:43 in the morning, with less than 9 hours left, Adolf was finally confronted by the shadows of his own soul. Regret, a bitter medicine he had long avoided, begins to take root. The leader who ruled with an iron fist now realizes he cannot escape the abyss he created for himself. 9 a.m., 6 hours and 30 minutes until Adolf's death. As the hours tick closer to the end, I witness something I've seen so many times before. The nearness of death stirs something within people. Even in the most ruthless, there are brief moments of clarity, fleeting, but powerful. And with Adolf, it's no different. Behind the harshness of his actions was a man who, at one point, dreamed of creating, not destroying. Death brings with it the clarity he avoided all his life. Now, despite his resistance, regret begins to surface. Adolf sits at the table. He tries to push the thoughts away, clinging to anything that might give him a sense of control. But the memories creep in, becoming more persistent. His mind drifts back to a cold Vienna, long before the devastation he would cause. He was young, and his only ambition was art. He wanted to create, to paint, to breathe life into something beautiful. But the Academy of Fine Arts rejected him over and over. That was the beginning of his frustration. Each no he heard seemed to sink him deeper into the feeling of failure. And it was in that moment of vulnerability that something within him started to change. He recalls a specific night, after yet another rejection, walking down the deserted streets. That's when he saw him. A man standing on the corner, wearing red hat. The stranger looked at him as if he already knew everything about him. He approached Adolf and, with a calm voice, began to speak. "You have a greater destiny, Adolf," the man said. "Your pain and rejection are only the beginning. They're shaping you for something much larger. You weren't born to merely observe the world, you were born to command it. The world doesn't need another lost artist, it needs a leader. If you embrace this," the man continued, "if you abandon the empty dreams of art and focus on what truly matters, you can become immortal. Your name will be remembered. You'll have the power to change the world." Those words cut deep. Adolf didn't doubt them, didn't question who the man was or why he was saying such things. He simply accepted it. In that moment, the idea of being an artist died. He would be something more. He left behind creation and turned toward power. He never saw the man with the red hat again, but his words took root in him like an undeniable truth. It was there, on that dark street corner, that his destiny shifted. What was once a dream of art became a thirst for control, and the path to destruction was set. Now, years later, the shadow of that choice looms over him, and the regret he always avoided starts to seep into his thoughts. Adolf tries to shake off these memories, but they're relentless. He stands from the chair, agitated, unable to bear the weight of his own decisions. At that moment, Eva enters the room, her presence quiet, but attentive. "Adolf, are you all right?" He takes a deep breath, struggling to find the right words, unable to meet her gaze. "I feel something different. Something I've never felt before." Eva watches him, concerned, but she doesn't press him. "What do you mean?" He hesitates. The words are heavy. For years, he remained steadfast in his choices, never allowing himself to question them. But now, the cracks are starting to show. "I don't know if I'd call it regret. But maybe, at some point, I lost my way. Maybe I took the wrong path." Eva stays silent, absorbing his words. He looks away, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "But to admit that it was all a mistake. I can't do that." He steps back, unable to bear Eva's gaze any longer. His pride still holds him captive, preventing him from fully acknowledging what he feels. But he knows. The nearness of death brings a painful clarity, and despite his struggle, the regret is growing. He had always believed that his destiny was unshakable, that his decisions were final. But as the end draws near, he begins to realize that he was shaped by lies, that he could have been someone else. And now, the regret he's denied for so long starts to consume him. Now it's noon. There are 3 hours and 30 minutes left until the end of Adolf. Time is running out, and no matter how hard he tries to push away the growing weight of guilt, the truth is closing in on him, something he can no longer ignore. Adolf paces back and forth in the bunker corridor, unable to stay still. The steady sound of his footsteps on the concrete floor brings no relief. He stops in front of a makeshift shelf, running his hand over books and documents as if searching for something, but nothing makes sense anymore. The words on the pages seem empty. The silence of the bunker, broken only by distant explosions, presses down on the space, making it feel even more suffocating. He picks up a report from the top of the pile, glances at it briefly, then tosses it back onto the table. His thoughts are chaotic. He tries to focus on the strategies his generals have laid out for him, but his mind drifts back to uncomfortable memories. Images of crowds that once cheered him now blur with the faces of victims, and the screams he thought he had left behind resurface in his mind. He tries, with all his might, to deny that he has failed. His life was built on certainties, on his unwavering conviction that he was right. But as time slips away, that certainty begins to unravel, and the regret he always kept at bay starts to creep in. Suddenly, the bunker door creaks open. An officer enters, his footsteps hesitant. He's holding a stack of papers, unsure of how to proceed. His voice comes out low, almost swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. "Sir, we have new reports from the defenses. There may still be time to reorganize our forces in the north," he says, his nervousness clear. Adolf turns slowly. His face is cold, showing no empathy or patience. He doesn't see a subordinate offering solutions, he sees another sign of failure. He steps forward quickly, ripping the papers from the officer's hands and throwing them to the floor in a harsh, abrupt motion. "Time," he shouts. "Don't you realize it's already over?" His voice shakes the cramped space, and the officer takes a step back, visibly frightened. "Get out! You led me to this. You've deceived me from the start." The officer stumbles backward, his hands trembling. He bumps into a chair as he rushes out the door, while Adolf stands still, fists clenched, his body shaking, not with power, but with helplessness. He feels his heart racing, the pressure in his chest growing. He had always believed that his strength would keep him in control. But now, even that is slipping away. All the symbols of power, the maps, the strategies, the commands he gave, now seem meaningless. Adolf collapses onto a bench near the wall, his breathing erratic. The bunker, already small, feels like it's closing in on him. He senses the presence of the figure that has haunted him since his youth. He doesn't need to see it to know it's there, always watching, always lurking. The faces of his victims, the horrors he caused, flood his thoughts. Memories he had once suppressed now come rushing back with overwhelming force. He presses his hands to his face, trying to push the thoughts away, but they are uncontrollable. Regret, at last, begins to take root. 12:30, 3 hours until Adolf's death. The power he thought he had gained was never really his. It always belonged to that force that had guided him from the beginning. Now, regret fills every corner of the bunker. There's nowhere left to run. He tries to remember the crowds that followed him, the applause he once basked in. But those memories now feel distant, faded, unreal. He realizes he was never the leader. From the start, he was being led. He failed, not only as a leader, but as a man. It's now 3 p.m. Only 30 minutes remain until Adolf's end. Time doesn't stop. Adolf sits in the corner of the bunker, his body exhausted, his hands trembling. He no longer has the strength to stand. Everything he built feels meaningless now. He feels a familiar presence. The figure with the red hat is there, standing in the middle of the room. It's no longer just a shadow in the back of his mind. It's visible, as if it had always been there, but he never wanted to truly see it. So, this is it? Adolf asks, his voice weak, but filled with growing despair. The figure simply smiles. The red hat glint under the dim light. The air is thick. The silence between them is nearly unbearable until the figure takes a step forward. You always knew, Adolf. From the beginning, you knew what you were doing. But you chose to believe there was something greater at play. Something beyond yourself. Adolf, defeated, lowers his head, his eyes fixed on the floor. I thought I was destined for something great. That there was a mission. The figure approaches slowly, calmly, as if time were on its side. There was a mission, yes. But you strayed. And who helped you lose your way? The figure raises one of its hands, making a gesture as if presenting an obvious answer. Adolf raises his eyes slowly, locking them on the figure. Was it you? The figure doesn't respond directly, but the smile grows wider. I didn't make you do anything, Adolf. I just gave you a little push. You chose the path. I was just there to make it easier. Consumed by a mixture of anger and despair, Adolf tries to stand, but his legs give out. He collapses back to the ground, drained. And now? Have you come to finish what you started? Have you come to take me? The figure steps closer, crouching down to Adolf's level. The red hat seemed to glow even more now. Take you? No. That, you did on your own. I'm just here to watch. I've always been watching. 3:15 p.m., 15 minutes remain until Adolf's death. Adolf feels the weight of regret grow, like a wave pulling him deeper and deeper. He looks at the figure, his once empty eyes now filled with bitter understanding. Everything he did, every choice, every act of power, it wasn't really his. He was merely a puppet, moved by his own ambitions and pushed by something he hadn't fully grasped until this moment. So, it was all a lie, he mutters, his voice barely audible. The figure lets out a soft laugh, almost amused by the situation. A lie? No, a choice. You always had options. But power blinded you. 3:20 p.m., 10 minutes remain until Adolf's death. Adolf feels the despair intensifying. The memories of everything he's done rise to the surface, but this time without the fog of pride. He sees the faces of the victims, the devastated fields, the destruction. The war, the suffering, he now understands that it was all a direct consequence of his own weaknesses. I could have been someone else, he says, tears beginning to fill his eyes. The figure in the red hat remains silent for a moment, watching Adolf with an unreadable expression. Yes, you could have. But you weren't. And now, there's no going back. Time's up. Adolf swallows hard, the bitter taste of regret filling his mouth. He tries to imagine how his life could have been different, but the images of destruction are too strong. He's trapped in the consequences of his actions. 3:29 p.m., only 60 seconds remain until Adolf's end. I watch him as his breathing grows heavy, his movements slow, as if every second stretches into eternity. This is the final moment, the last act of a life defined by decisions and accumulated power. He sits at the table, fully aware of the choice he made to mark his end. Adolf stands still, his trembling hand raising the glass to his lips. He drinks the bitter liquid, as if trying to impose one final sense of control over his own life. The bunker around him is wrapped in an eerie calm, a thick silence that seems to disconnect him from the world outside. Everything he built now crumbles before his eyes. The power he sought so desperately, the illusions of greatness, are vanishing. He knows, deep down, that none of it will save him. He once thought he'd be remembered for his achievements, but he always knew, deep within, that he was wrong. Now, the truth is laid bare. He closes his eyes for a moment, as if trying to push away the pain and the doubts. His breathing slows, weakens. He sits down slowly, surrendering to the plan he set in motion. The choice was his, and now the full weight of it comes crashing down on him. 3:30 p.m. Adolf's final hour. Adolf's body collapses violently to the floor. I see the impact. It's sharp, brutal, final. Inside him, the end process begins, inevitable. The blood that once surged through his veins now hesitates. His cells start dying off, one by one, deprived of the oxygen that once kept them alive. Muscles that once held firm now go limp. His breathing stops. His heart, which pumped tirelessly for so long, struggles for one last beat, but fails. The electrical impulses that kept him functioning now flicker out, like lights being turned off in a building, one by one. His brain, swiftly, begins to collapse. The thoughts that once flowed now disperse into complete silence. The last image in his mind is hazy, incomplete. His body starts to lose life, cell by cell. All the strength he believed he had, the illusion of control, dissolves. There is no pain. Just the cold, spreading through his body. There's no turning back. I step forward calmly, with respect, knowing the time has come to fulfill my duty. The silver cord, which ties the soul to the body, lies before me. With one smooth movement, I extend my scythe and sever the cord. The thread snaps, and Adolf's soul is freed from its physical prison. There is no judgment on my part, just a carrying out of what must be done. Even the greatest tyrants in history deserve love and respect. I am not the judge. I am simply the one who reaps the life and sets it free to pass on. I look at Adolf, his soul now separated from its physical form, and I speak with sincerity. The doors of repentance will always be open, but you must pay for every act you committed. You made thousands suffer. There's much to do to atone for your sins. Don't stop, keep moving forward. His soul begins to drift away. The bunker, which once felt like a prison, now feels empty. Darkness takes over the space as his journey on Earth ends, but his path is only just beginning. Adolf made his choice, ending his own road. The shadowy figure that guided him for so long now steps aside, its mission complete. But before his final breath, a fleeting spark of something he always ignored flickers in his mind: regret. He realizes, for a brief moment, that his wrong choices defined him and that everything could have been different. I watch, as I do with all souls. For me, this is just one more life coming to an end, one more soul passing through. The world outside moves on, but for him, there is no return. In the end, the control Adolf thought he had was just another illusion. He faced the truth he had avoided for so long. Death came by his own hand, and with it, regret, the last flicker of humanity left in his soul. The bunker remains silent. The heavy air carries the end of an era. The story ends, but the lesson remains. Regret, though it may come too late, is what separates a man from the darkness he creates for himself. And remember, one day, my friend, we will meet again on the day of your death.
In shadows I walk, I've been here from the start. I am the hand that seals fate, the end of every heart. I'm no villain nor hero, I'm the peace amidst the pain, the angel who comes, who takes, yet offers love again.